in week 2 of Back to Basics month. So if you weren't here last week, that's okay. I'll catch us up briefly. But, you know, for the weeks of January, I want to take us back to basics and look at kind of what I call the executive summary of Ernest Holmes' seminal book, The Science of Mind, and put it in everyday language. I want to tell you that the biggest challenge I have with this is not understanding the concepts, which is most new people's biggest challenge. The biggest challenge I have is looking at that textbook and boiling each chapter down to 3 points that you guys can all take with you. I mean, OMG, he's wordy. Let's just put it that way. But we love him. So last week we talked about the thing itself, and that was where Ernest Holmes talked about the nature of God. And what we said last week is that God is a principle. God is not an anthropomorphized being or a human, but God is a principle, that this principle works along immutable laws, and that these laws are activated by our thoughts. So that was what we basically covered last week, okay? This week we're going to talk about the way it works. The way it works. And now we're prepping for next week, which is how to use it. So these 2 chapters are very similar, but Ernest really peels this apart and analyzes down into some of the science and definitely the metaphysics of it. So today we're going to talk about the way it works, the way God works in our lives. Now we have to remember that God is a principle. Okay, so that was last week, but we got to really hold that, because if we're still operating under the conception of God as the scary guy with the white beard and the clouds that has all the human qualities of both kindness but judgment, of, you know, both justice but also vengeance, if we still are operating under that principle, then the way it works will make sense. But once we accept and really kind of embrace that God is a principle that works on immutable laws, just like gravity. I said last week, it doesn't matter if you're a good person or a bad person. You step off the roof, you're going to hit the ground. That's the type of immutable law that God works under. So with that in mind, let's talk about the way it works. And the first thing that Ernest says in this chapter is that it always works for good. There is only good. Now that's kind of a hard one to swallow, because like in our existential reality, we've experienced bad, right? We've experienced what we would call bad. So this is a hard one for people, you know, and I sometimes get frustrated when I hear people, you know, I watched this happen years ago. A woman was in pain and she said something about her dog died, and the counselor that she was talking to said, yeah, but it's all God, it's all good. Okay. There's the difference between our existential reality as humans and the broader principle that there's only good. And it is a matter of perspective. It's a matter of perspective. So when Ernest says there's only good, what he means is that the good is always flowing. When you walk into a room and it is dark, you turn on the light switch, right? Now, when we walk in here and the sun's in our eyes, you guys have watched me kind of dance around like that. You watched Jamie do it this morning when the sun's in our eyes. We don't turn on the dark switch. There's no dark that sucks all the light out of the room. There is light that we either are letting in or not. And that's what Ernest means when he says there's only good. There is a stream of pure positive energy that is God, that we are allowing or we are not, but it is always there for us. And so when we are not allowing it, that is when our experience looks bad. Now, just imagine the air quotes around every time I say bad, okay? I don't want to have to do this every time, but just know when I say bad, I've got these little guys around, okay? Because I don't believe there's really bad. There's either good that's out there that we are allowing, or there's good that's out there that we are not allowing. But there's no bad. There's a story that actually a few months ago when Robert Anderson was here, he sang the song about it. But there's a Dow story called Maybe. And for those of you who weren't here then, the story goes, there was a farmer in the village, and he had a horse, and one day the horse ran away. And all of his neighbors came to him and said, oh, what terrible luck, your horse ran away. And the farmer says, maybe. And then the next day the horse came back and it brought 3 wild horses with it, so his herd was just expanded by 3 horses, and the neighbors go, what good luck! And the farmer says, maybe. And then the next day, the farmer's son is out, and he decides to ride one of the unbroken horses, and he's out riding the unbroken horse, and the horse throws him, and he breaks his leg. And the neighbors come in and say, "What bad luck?" And the farmer says, "Maybe." And then the next day, the emperor's army comes through, and they're recruiting for the military, and they can't take the man's son because he's got a broken leg. And the neighbors say, "Well, good luck." And the man says, "Maybe." That is the good and the bad that we look at in life. When we deem things good or bad, that is our human perspective. But it is nothing except an event that we have tagged in some way or the other. There's that long-time existential question, is the earth flat? What do you guys think? Is the earth flat?
Maybe.
Thank you! She gets an A right there. Maybe. From our human perspective, the earth is flat. I'm standing here, I'm not holding on, trying not to roll off, right? The earth is flat. If we are building a building, you flatten the earth. You want the earth flat. So from that perspective, that close-up perspective, of course the earth is flat. It has to be. We have machines that flatten it. But as you raise your perspective, is the earth flat? Of course not. It's round. So there is only good. And when we are in that experience of good, bad, right, wrong, yes, no, we have to remember that we are in a human place, which is fine, and we are looking at it from that human perspective, which at times is necessary. And when we return to the principle, we have to remember, first and foremost, there's only good. And that's a real mature thing to have happen. There is a technique that you can start to practice. When something bad happens, feel all your human feelings about it, grieve, get angry, whatever you need to do, and then stop and say, there must be good coming from this. I think we've probably all had the experience where something happened, and in the moment we were wringing our hands and gnashing our teeth, saying, "Oh no, what am I going to do?" And 5 years later, you look back and you go, "That was the best thing that ever happened to me." Has everyone had some version of this experience?
Yes.
That's the way life works. There's only good. The trick is, when we get the zing of the bad, remembering there's only good. And you just have to write this out to see what happens. So there's only good. The second thing, it operates through us. Through us. So we talked last week about Santa God. You know, Santa God that's keeping the naughty and nice list up there, and only instead of presents or coal, it's heaven or hell. You know, and you're just hoping to please Santa God, and that's not the way God works. It works through us. I spent years trying to figure out what my right livelihood should be. Because I would go and get jobs. I've had a million jobs, and they were great. They never felt right, or I started to get tired of them, or something happened. But I was looking for my good out there. I was looking, and everyone said, "Well, your prosperity's got to come through you." And I'd be like, I don't even understand what that means. But then I realized that there's something unique that I have to give that comes through me that no one else can give. And that's how our fortunes come. That's how love comes to us. That's how our relationships come. That's how all this comes, is when we give what's inside of us genuinely and uniquely. God works through us. Do you guys remember that? It was a very spiritual movie. It's about 25 years old now. It's called Field of Dreams.
Yes.
Guys remember this? So for those of you who don't remember or haven't seen it, Kevin Costner hears a voice. And it says, "If you build it, they will come." And of course, he's like, "Hey, who's out there?" You know, and everybody thinks he's crazy. There's a scene, and it was awesome. I wanted to pull it up, and I couldn't get the Wi-Fi to work, but I wanted to show it to you. But there's a scene where he's told his wife about this, and she's the voice in us that's like, "Oh, yeah, right," you know, she plays that role. And so they're sitting at the kitchen table, and she goes, "So what are you going to do?" And he goes, "I think I'm going to build a field." And the look on his face, Kevin Costner did a great job, because the look on his face is, he is astonished by what he's saying, as she is. He's like, "I think I'm going to build a field." And she's like, "Okay, then build the field." Well, for what purpose? It makes no sense, right? In that movie, it makes no sense. We don't understand why he's building the baseball field. There's this weird voice out there. James Earl Jones shows up. What is this all about? We don't know. But he listens to the next thing that comes through him. Oh, now he's supposed to go find James Earl Jones's character. And then he's supposed to drive to Fenway Park in Boston. None of this makes any sense. But he trusts it and he listens to it. And at the end, that's his fortune. He doesn't lose the farm. Lines and lines of cars are coming to see the baseball field he just built. And I tell you what, the actual set, still today there are lines and lines of cars coming to see the baseball field. That's how God works through us. Through us. We may not be able to see the end, but we get that nudge, we get that tug. There's something I should do. All of my friends knew that I was the same way about starting the center. I was like, I think I'm supposed to start a church in Evergreen. I never had that conscious thought in my life, but there was something tugging me. I didn't know what the end result was going to look like, but I just followed the next step. I just followed the next step. So God works through us. It's not something that falls in our lap. I want $1 million. $1 million doesn't fall into our laps, unless you play the lotto. But it doesn't just fall into our laps. It comes because we've given that unique gift that we have inside of us, that God-given talent, that perspective, that way of thinking, being, loving, looking at things, that thing that is unique to each one of us. And we have been willing to put it out there authentically and genuinely without any walls up and contribute it. And to the extent that we do that, that is the extent that we are expressing and experiencing God. And as we do that, then we experience more God by greater clarity, more abundance, more fulfilling relationships, more love in our lives. And it's a cycle like that, but it has to come through us. It has to come through us. And then finally, based on there's only good and it comes through us, we get as much as we can conceive. We get as much good as we can conceive. You've heard all this before. But the great thing is the thimble or the bucket. You go to the ocean with a thimble or a bucket, and I say I go with a pipeline. But even that, how much can we believe in? And I love there's a parable, and I have to tell you that one of the great things that going through my ministerial training did for me is it really helped me understand some of Jesus' parables, because I always was, parables named after paraboloid, like it's kind of off kilter, and that was the point of it, really make you think. But this one parable, I always had an issue with this parable, and it's the parable of the vineyards and the workers in the vineyard. And now I get it, that we get as much as we can conceive. So the parable goes like this. A farmer needs workers in the vineyard, and he goes out early in the morning before sunup, and he finds some men looking for work, and he says, would you come work in the vineyard? They say yes, and he says, I'll pay you a denarius for the day. And they come, they work for the day. And then about 9 o'clock, the farmer goes back out looking for more workers in the field. And there are workers that come. Now it's a few hours later, and he says, will you come work in the vineyard? And they say yes, and he says, I'll pay you a denarius. And they do that. And then he goes out at lunch, and the same thing happens, and he gets more workers, and he promises them 1 denarius. And then he goes out at 5 o'clock at night, and he finds the last few workers, and he gets them to come in, and he promises them 1 denarius. And then at 6 o'clock, when it's time to quit, he has his foreman pay the workers, and the ones who arrived at 5 o'clock were to be paid first, and they were to be paid 1 denarius. So the men who started at 6 a.m. or 9 a.m. come forward, and they say to the vineyard owner, this isn't fair. We worked all day. How come the guy who comes at 5 o'clock gets the same as we do? And the vineyard owner says, why would you question my generosity? It's my money. I can do whatever I want with it, and I choose to be generous. Okay, now that's the parable. I always had a problem with this. Like, what? The workers at 6 a.m. agreed to work a whole day for the denarius. Their consciousness said 1 denarius, 1 day's work. The guys who started at 5 o'clock agreed to work half a day for 1 denarius. This isn't about the vineyard owner being unfair. The vineyard owner is willing to give you whatever you can accept. The guys at 5 o'clock came and said, why shouldn't I get a denarius for 1 hour of work? Of course I can. There's no problem with that. They didn't feel guilty. They didn't go, oh, I'm not worthy. I'm not working hard enough for my denarius. They came at 5 and said, yes, The noon ones came at noon and said yes. The ones at 6 a.m. said, okay, I'll work the whole day for the denarius. God gives us what we expect, what we can conceive, what we think we deserve. That's what Jesus is telling us in that parable. If you think you have to work really, really hard to prove your worthiness for your good, then guess what? You'll work really, really hard, and you'll scrape together some good, because that's what you conceive. If you think that life is easy and things should just flow to you, and that you're worthy of the kingdom of heaven right here on earth, that all through the great scriptures it says that we are worthy now and that we can have it now, then you're just going to roll through life and all your friends are going to hate you because it's so easy for you and nothing's hard and you just get what you want and you decide you want something and it manifests and it's no big deal because that's what you conceive. So it's never out there. It's not an issue that God is this fickle God that goes, oh, I really like Jeff, so he's going to get a lot. And, Kevin, he just gets a little. That's not how it works. It's all up to us. God is the principle of good, flowing well-being to us at all times. And it's in our consciousness going, yes, or, oh, I feel guilty having that much. Maybe I'll just take this much and then I won't feel so guilty. Or, oh, who am I? I'll never get what I want. I'll just take this one. That's up to us. That's the way it works. There's only good. It works through us. And we get exactly as much as we can conceive. There is no external force out there making the decisions. The way it works is up to us. Let's pray. So, when we start the prayers and we say we feel into that place where we recognize the presence of God, we are tapping into that power of good that we feel operating through us. And so I invite each of us right now to consciously court that presence. To feel into that heart space, whether it's in your solar plexus or your heart or your throat or wherever you feel it in your body. A place where you know there is good. And as we feel into that, we recognize that God is a presence and a power right here and right now. It is with us, operating through us always. And so I just recognize and accept for each person present that this power of God has chosen to uniquely manifest as each one of us. That we are emanations of that divine life. We are unique and necessary. We are individuals here to give our gifts. That is how the world works. That is the way God works. I know for each person here that there is nothing wrong. No one here has ever been less than, diminished, anything that other than that divine God life that is only good. And so I recognize for each person here that we shift our perspective to know that there is good and we ought to have it. We accept that principle of God into our lives. We open our hearts. We allow our thoughts to flow in that stream of well-being. I know as we leave this sanctuary here today, whether we stay for the healing service after or whether we go on about our lives, that we have a new perspective, that we broaden our perspective to see the good, to look for the good, to praise the good. That we feel it operating in our lives and that we practice feeling good rather than feeling upset. We practice knowing that God is always with us. And we absolutely accept the idea that God is for us and never against us. And so recognizing all of this, I know for each of us that our day is uplifted, our week is inspired, our consciousness is shifted now to have a new thought, a new idea about God. And recognizing this, I just express great gratitude for this principle that is always working, whether we're aware of it or not. It is always there. We can always go to it at all times. And so with this gratitude, I just open up my heart and give thanks for the presence of each person here, not just here today on this room, but here on this planet, giving their unique gifts without which the world would not be the same. We are all necessary. We are all important because it is through us that we bring God to the world. And so with gratitude for knowing this, I just call it good. I call us blessed. I let it all be so. And please join me in saying,
So it is.